Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. If you're listening for the first time, this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And I hope you've had a lovely week so far. I've had a very nice week. It's been decent in the markets. It's been nice in the weather. And I've had lots and lots of messages asking about how my son's getting on with the home program. And I have to say, for those of you who kind of after updates on that, I've never seen such a positive transformation in a human being. I really haven't. The boy I ran a workshop the other day, came with me, he was motivated, he came out of his shell, he was talking to the group of people, he's offering advice, he gets up, he's motivated to do the work that I set him. It's just a complete transformation of behavior, so I'm really happy with that. I'll keep you up to date with how that's all going, and in this week's episode, if this is your first time you're listening to this, before we go on, it would be really good if you could just give it a little rating or a little a little thumbs up here, and after you've listened to it, let me know what you think, leave it a little review. But this week I'm going to be talking a little bit about kind of my thoughts on a bit of disruption. Okay, so over the years, one of the standout qualities that's allowed me to generate above average income and wealth is my ability to be disruptive and look at things in a disruptive way, so I can break things apart and maybe remake them in a better way. And I remember when I was a kid, my mum always used to come into my room, and I was the type of kid that had a little butter knife, and I'd take the toaster apart, or take the remote control apart, or the video player, and I'd just be putting it back together, seeing how it works and things like that. And I've always kind of had that inquisitive mind. But I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But what I want to talk about first is I got a question about my thoughts on MLM businesses. Now, I don't know if any of you listeners are part of an MLM business, and I'm not going to say that there's they've got a bad name because most of them are crap, right? But it's like most trading educators. It's the fact that it's been oversaturated with people without a product. So then it looks like some kind of Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme, where there's no actual good product at the end of it. So there's no product. And it's a bit like trading educators, right? It's the same thing, which is, again, going back to disruption. That's why I like to disrupt and be completely transparent, let people watch me trade, tell them that it's not going to be easy, give them realistic expectations from day one. And that's disruptive. It's refreshing. People like that. They like to know where they stand. People like to know where they stand. So first of all, I would say, most MLM businesses, and if you don't know what MLM stands for, it's multi-level marketing. And essentially, it's where you sell a product. Okay, it's not a new concept. It's not a new product. You're not creating something. It's something that you're selling. It's someone else's product. So the approach is basically you sell a product, you get others to be loyal customers, and then you convince those to sell products themselves. So you get a cut of their sales. And then in the future, if that person you recruited then kind of gets people selling under them, called their downline, you end up receiving a cut of that as well. And you kind of live in this hope that you'll become some kind of millionaire down the line through all the sales under the people selling underneath you. And that's how it works. But I personally know someone who worked their way up into an MLM, and he was he's a very influential person. He was I think he was in the Air Force. He came out of the Air Force and went into business, and he didn't know what to do, so he went straight into MLM. I'm not going to say what name it was, but just to give you an example of some of the MLMs that are big out there is kind of Arbonne, Forever Living, Avon, all those kind of types of MLM businesses. And there's also some bad ones that have got some bad raps, like Amway and things like that, Herbalife. But he was out there, and he got to, I think it was a second or third highest paid seller in the UK. And he told me that the most he ever earned in a month was about £500. Now, that was residual income, so it kept coming after he left or after he stopped doing it, but it obviously whittled down by now. He doesn't get that anymore. So it was residual income because it was coming from people underneath him making sales. But £500 after putting in, 2-3 years of work to build up that team, massive team, get people on board, getting them selling products, getting downlines, and for £500 a month. Now, is that worth it? I don't know, and I guess this is the topical conversation, because MLM's been around for a long time. Most people I know, and most people you know, have been to some kind of Amway party or Tupperware party or health products party, and there's nothing criminal about like this kind of side hustle, but you've got to draw the line in the sand when you see someone on Facebook posting 52 pictures about living the dream or financial independence, and that they struggled to make their car payment this month. That's the difference, because the people that kind of go into this MLM really have this, they put on this facade, and it's I think the thing that stops them making it in MLM is the fact that they're not congruent. They're posting pictures about kind of living the dream and financial independence when really they're grinding out there, really trying to make ends meet. So that's kind of one thing to pay attention to when you're thinking about MLM. I guess the question was what my thoughts on it, so I'm just reeling off my thoughts. So there's very few people that actually make it in MLM businesses. I know several people that have started working in MLM businesses. I've even gone along to as one of the potential downlines, believe it or not, to kind of support, and they didn't make it. They gave up. Just one thing to be clear on: if you're affiliated with an MLM, okay, you are not an entrepreneur. Okay, you're a salesperson. And there's nothing wrong with being a salesperson. For everyone, salespeople can make boatloads of cash. It's the most highly paid profession on the face of the earth, and it always will be, because we always have to sell something. Even if there's no money, we've got to be the top of the food chain by influencing someone, and selling to people, selling ourselves to people. We've always got to be able to sell, and if you can sell well, chances are you're going to do very well. It's a very, very highly paid profession, and they can make boatloads of money if they're good at it. Every company needs a reputable salesperson. But the fact remains that if you're selling subpar supplements, earrings or Tupperware or candles, or out of a catalogue, or you're just taking a catalogue to your closest friends over some wine and appetizers, you're not a business person. You have to understand that that's not an entrepreneur. It's not a business person. And the reason why is because, first one is, you don't control the product cost. Now, I've been in business since I was 22, and there's no bigger variables to whether or not you'll succeed in business other than what and how much. And the reason it's so important to be in charge of price point is because the price points are usually made after a great deal of market research and studying behavioral patterns and how decisions are made and how people are willing and able to buy your product. Because, let's just say you might have let's just say you're a YouTuber, for instance, and you're teaching kids how to play computer games. Well, you're going to have millions of people willing to buy a product from you, but you'll have zero able to pay for it if they're like 8 years old. So, that kind of research goes into the best pricing point for products. And chances are people who work in MLMs, they haven't made that. They haven't made those decisions. All that work's been done by the person that set the business up. And also factored into that price is the cost of all the downlines and all the rest of it, all the overheads for the business and the time horizon at which they're likely to get a return on investment from the downline and all that. So that's very, very important to be in any kind of control and to have any kind of entrepreneurial influence. And with an MLM, you don't control the product cost, so that's out the window. An entrepreneur needs to decide with thorough detail exactly what they will put to market, and they'll need to decide on a price point. And that plays a fundamental role in the success or failure of an entrepreneur. And if you're not making those decisions, you're not an entrepreneur. Okay, you don't have that entrepreneurial power in that current position. And many times companies go back to the drawing board. A theory doesn't always prove to be right in practice, so they go, right, well, that didn't work. We tested it out in the marketplace. Now we need to pull it back. And it's like this never-ending, ongoing process as you refine and you tune and you introduce new products to the market and try to meet your needs of your customers and get feedback and tweak things. None of that occurs in multi-level marketing. None of that. All you do in an MLM is you get notice of a hot new product, you buy the hot new product, and you sell it at a markup. That's it. So that's the definition of a salesperson, a commission-based salesperson. So the next reason it's not entrepreneurial is that you're more concerned with getting people into your downline than actually selling the product. So for a legitimate business, sales trumps everything else. Lots of different metrics have to be looked at. The cost of the client acquisition, marketing budgets, client loyalty, returning customers, churn rate. But at the end of the day, it's cold, hard sales numbers. And the entrepreneur that started the business, they really care about the product. They care about all of those things so that they can push their product that they believe in 100% into the hands of as many people as possible. In an MLM situation, you're less concerned about actually selling the product than you are with finding other people who are willing to sell the product under you or your downlines. You'll make a pound here or a dollar here and a pound there or a dollar there by selling your protein shakes or whatever it is, but the real money lies in the power of exponential results. So what happens is you begin to think to yourself when you work in an MLM, if I can get 10 people and they can each get 10 people and then they can also get 10 people, you start thinking about these exponential results which can explode in the future, but don't amount to a lot. But all of a sudden your priority shifts from getting people to buy your stuff to getting people to sell your stuff. And that's not how an entrepreneur works. Have you ever noticed how multi-level marketers on social media, they're always looking for people to join their team? Most entrepreneurs will kill to have people join their team. They just can't afford it, right? They'd love people to join their team, but they haven't got enough cash in the bank because they're trying to sell their product so much. They're trying to really get their product in front of people because they believe in it. But these people always seem to ask people to join their team. They've always got vacancies and they're bloody pushy as well. And the third reason, which is a big one, that it's not entrepreneurial to be in an MLM is that genuine constructive criticisms of the business are not addressed. Okay? Like, as you probably know, I absolutely love real constructive criticism in the way I do business. I'm always asking for reviews. I'm always asking for feedback on the newsletter. If you read the newsletter, there's a survey that goes out, after every event that I do, a little text message survey goes out to ask how I did it. Is there anything we could have done better? Is there anything we did badly? Or is there anything we did particularly well? How can we improve? How can we improve? I hire advisors to help me when I need it, and I outsource certain tasks to those with more experience and more expertise than I have. Ask a multi-level marketing salesperson about the business plan and criticize it, and you're slapped with some kind of statement about, oh, you must be a hater, right? Or, oh, they love the old the corporate clone, right? Or they'll just reply with something, oh, you're just small-minded, or you don't believe. And did you know that Mark Zuckerberg pitched the idea of Facebook to 5 people and 3 of them turned him down? And yeah, all that kind of stuff. Colonel Sanders didn't sell one piece of chicken till he was 65 years old, and Alexander Graham Bell's telephone said it was going to be a failure. And that's kind of the statements that they come back to. And if you notice the statements that I just made, they're all emotional pitches and fluff. None of them really mean a thing relevant to the constructive criticism. So I believe that there's no such thing as negative. I basically like constructive criticism, whether it's negative or positive. I don't care if it's someone just saying it's a terrible product, and I don't care if it's someone saying it's a brilliant product, as long as there's constructive criticism, a reason behind it. If someone just says, oh, you're crap, that's not constructive. But, I remember once I asked an MLMer, I'll call them, if they were concerned about this kind of flawed business model, and they literally just responded with a picture of some kind of pyramid scheme with a CEO, president, vice president, middle management, team leaders, the hardworking employees, and they built it into a pyramid, and they were kind of like, oh, this looks like a pyramid scheme as well. So there was no constructive answer to that as well. And I agree, I totally agree on not working for corporates, but it still doesn't address the criticism to the MLM business. And if any of you guys listening to this find an answer without getting slapped in the face or kind of, don't be ridiculous kind of thing, let me know. The person that asked this question asked me for my advice right on this, so here it is. Lastly, you're not an entrepreneur if you work in the MLM business because you're not solving problems and using leverage and influence to create meaningful change. All right? You might be entrepreneurial, but you're not an entrepreneur. Look, there's nothing wrong with being a salesperson. Salespeople make great livings. They sell stuff. That's what salespeople do. Always keep in mind what you're doing and just be true to yourself, I guess. You need to create, analyze, streamline, improve upon, work relentlessly on your product and your sales funnel and your marketing and your culture and your organizational systems if you're running a business. And most MLM people don't have to do any of that stuff. Now, I know there's going to be some multi-level marketing marketers listening to this podcast and disagreeing with me, but if you can send me some legitimate responses, an email or a message in defense to the 3 points I just made, I promise you that I will read them and I will share those points on next week's podcast as well. But I just think that it takes a little bit more to be an entrepreneur than a filtered picture on Instagram with hashtag YOLO after it. All right. So just to kind of wrap that little rant up or tangent, I just want to reiterate, there is nothing wrong with MLM, the ones that have got good products, and there's lots of good people that believe in the product and they're going after it and they're pushing out a decent message because they believe in the product. Nothing wrong with that. Most MLM businesses are terrible. They've got a bad name, just like trading education businesses that I'm in. So I'm in the same boat, believe it or not. But my true advice is you don't need to work for an MLM. You don't need to be, if you've got that urge to be your own boss, be your own boss. So I know that the people listening to this podcast, you want to be more. Otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. I was speaking to someone the other day about podcasts, and their kind of view was like, well, not everyone wants to self-develop. Not everyone wants to grow. Not everyone wants to do more. And I absolutely get that. I know there's people that don't want to grow. They're complacent or they're happy with where they are and they've succeeded. Their happiness is the key, right? But if you're listening to a podcast, you have to bear in mind that you're listening to a self-help podcast which puts you in the category of you want to be more, you want to do more, you're self-developing, you're growing. So anyone that listens to this podcast in particular, my advice is don't live in the shadows of someone else. And I always feel like if you're going into MLM, it's like putting half of your foot in the water or just a dip in a toe in the water and you're not going all in. And of course, if we don't go all in, we don't get the results. And the problem is usually where that person's come from is normally a corporate business. That's why they've got their chip on the shoulder about the corporate business. And what corporate businesses do is they instill they breed imposter syndrome into people. They put fear into people. And there's a story that I posted up a story a little while back about, I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was about an elephant. I don't know if you guys have been to a circus or when they used to have the circuses, and they used to tie this rope onto a collar around the leg of the elephant, and they would tie it to a wooden peg that was hammered into the ground. And this 10-foot tall, 5,000 kilogram beast that could easily snap the chain, it could easily uproot the wooden peg and escape, but it doesn't do that. In fact, it doesn't even try. So the world's most powerful animal, which could easily uproot a tree, I've seen them uproot trees and feed their young with the fruits on the tree, as easily as we could snap a toothpick, remains tied down by this tiny peg and a bit of rope. It's because when the elephant was a baby, its trainers used the exact same methods. It was tied to the ground with a rope around its leg, and the rope was in a metal stake in the ground, and they were strong enough for the baby elephant. The elephant would tug at it, and when it tried to break away, the chain would pull it back, and sometimes, the elephant would pull harder and harder, and the chain would just cut into the skin of the elephant's leg, and it will make it bleed, and it will create a wound, and it'd hurt the baby elephant, and sooner or later, the baby elephant just realized it's pointless trying to escape. So it just stops trying, literally stops trying. And now this big circus elephant is, tied by a rope just around its leg. And what it does, it's an anchor because it remembers the pain that it felt as a baby, and it just doesn't try to break away in the first place because it's got a fear about what will happen in the future based on experiences of the past. So this little rope and a little wooden peg is plunged into the ground, and the elephant just stands still. And it remembers its limitations, and it knows that it can only move as much as the rope will allow it to. And it doesn't matter that the stake has been replaced by a wooden peg. It doesn't matter that it was a 100-kilo baby and now it's a 5,000-kilo beast. The belief prevails. It doesn't even try. And I think these limitations and these fears are embedded in people that have been through a corporate business. They've broken out of a job, or they're trying to break out of a job, and what they're doing is they're just putting their toe in the water. So my advice isn't to do that. My advice is to, get out and do what you want to do. Go all in on what you want to do. Have the confidence to do that. And many, many people have this. It's not just the job. It's just everything that's happened in the past puts fears into us for the future. So every time you go out into the world and you see someone who you perceive to be more financially viable, or more intelligent, or more knowledgeable, or more successful in business, or has got a more stable family life, or is more attractive, more fit, the moment you perceive that person has something that you don't, you shrink yourself and you decide to live in their shadows. And what's even worse is nowadays we're living in this time where this positive thinking era, and that's really screwed people up because it's making people believe that everything's positive all the time, and it isn't. There's positive and negatives. So the fear's even worse. It's like, well, if you go into business, you've got to be great from the start, and you absolutely haven't. The way that you're great at business is if you disrupt. And what disruption is, it's a way of looking at the marketplace, seeing what's out there at the moment. Is it meeting someone's needs in terms of the value they're getting? Is it meeting someone's needs in the terms of information they're getting, the speed at which they're getting it, the value at which they're paying for it? And if it isn't, and it normally isn't, you just change one of those things and you disrupt it and you package it and you give it to them in a way that's meaningful and well received, where you can charge more and have better customers and they rave about you. And you really don't need to be the best to go and deliver that service. You don't need to be an absolute genius. You don't have to be an expert. You just need to know your stuff. You need to know your stuff, and you need to know that you can deliver value. There's no need to go and work for an MLM when you've got everything inside you. If you've got that drive to just put your toe in the water, just notch it up a little bit and go all in. So that's it for this episode. I really just wanted to kind of give you a little boost on this episode, because I get asked about businesses and different business ventures, and if you want to grow wealth, we got to grab the balls by the horns. Okay, no one's perfect. Why settle and follow someone else's tracks with some half-assed product when you can go out and deliver something that's truly meaningful to you, that there's a demand for in the marketplace, and you can deliver and get that fair exchange. I know that the things that you hear in this podcast are quite contrarian, and there's people saying things like, oh, what you told me about finance and property, it's not kind of what I've been told before. And of course, right, the main system, the governments and the schools and all that, they don't cater for the select few. The people that are listening to this podcast, they know that they're just going to go and figure it out. That what they're trying to do is just get the masses to a midpoint, to a decent level. They're not looking at the 10%, 5%, 1%ers. They know that they're just going to go on and smash it and figure it out. So this information isn't widely known. So the schools and the governments and the education system, they're just trying to get people to kind of this midpoint. And that's not where we want to be. We don't want to settle for the midpoint. We want to go all the way. So that's it for this episode, guys. I just want to say before we head off, if you've got any questions that you'd like me to cover or topics you'd like me to cover, go over to alwaysfreepodcast.com and leave a little comment on the contact form there, or email me at info@jasongraystone.com and let me know what you want me to talk about on this podcast, and I'll happily bring that up in a future episode. So that's it for this episode, guys. Have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.